So I'm going to talk through a couple of steaks tonight. We've got a ribeye steak on the bone, a Cote de Boeuf, or sometimes in the butchers they call them cowboy steaks. So this is about 1 kilo of meat on the bone. So I'm going to talk about how to cook that, and then I'm also going to talk about a couple of sirloin steaks and how to cook these also. So as you can see here from the meat, I got it from John Stone, who's doing a home delivery service at the moment, which is fantastic. So I have a char grill pan on here, but this could also be a barbecue, or it could be just a normal flat pan. I just like to get the marks on it, and I'm going to show you what you need to do with your steak first. So as you can see on the back of the sirloin, there's quite a little bit of fat, which is all flavour. This is really good. And I'm just going to take a nice thin sharp knife and I'm going to score the fat. So as you can see, I'm just running not down into the meat, just along till I'm hitting the sinew along the fat. And then I'm going to go in the other direction. So I'm doing a nice little diamond sear along the steak, the fat on the steak. And then I'm going to season it up really well with some Mullins salt. And something that's said a lot to chefs is that we use way too much salt. But a lot of this salt is going to stay in the pan, and you'll see that as we're cooking. I'm not going to season it with pepper just yet. I'll season it with pepper after we sear it off. And then I've just got a little bit of oil here. I'm not going to oil the pan because I don't want the place to get too smoky, even though it will get a little bit smoky. So we've oiled the steak and seasoned the steak, and now I'm going to put fat side down onto the grill. And I'm going to leave it alone. Okay, so that's on high heat now. You can see the smoke. That's what we want here. We want plenty of heat because I want to get that. You can already see the fat starting to render down on the steak as it's landed into the pan. So nice and hot now. And you'll also notice I haven't touched it since I put it in the pan. There tend to be a tendency for people to keep, for home cooks, to continue pressing the steak and touching the steak. What that can do, it can tend to let the juices that's in the steak start to release, and you could potentially end up with a dry steak. So I'm going to leave that in the pan now for a couple of minutes till all of that fat goes nice and crispy, and then I'm going to get a nice hot sear onto either side of the steak. I'll try and get the bar marks on the grill, and while that's all going on, I have the oven on because this is a relatively big piece of steak. I'm going to finish it in the oven. This is at 200 degrees, and I have a tray in the oven already to cook it in. I'm just going to quickly show you what I'm also cooking here tonight. I've got some potatoes that I've diced, a little bit of olive oil in the pan, and then I sauteed them off in the olive oil so they start to take on a little bit of colour. Then I added in a couple of knobs of butter and some sprigs of rosemary. I haven't seasoned it yet. I haven't added in any salt or pepper as yet. Just before I put them into the oven, I'll season them up with plenty of salt and pepper and throw them into the oven. So this steak now has had probably about 4 minutes on that heat searing off, and you can see now that the fat is nearly almost gone, and that's gone crispy now. Okay, so and then you can also see I didn't add any oil into the pan, and I don't know whether you can see that there, but there's quite a lot of oil in the pan. There's actually a little bit too much oil in the pan. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to strain a little bit off. There's a little bit too much oil in there for me. Now, if this was on a barbecue, all of that oil would fall down onto the coals in the barbecue and obviously give you quite a lot of heat. So now we're going to put the steak in. We're going to just give it a little press. You can use a spatula if you wish for that. And now again, a nice high heat, and leave it alone. I'm going to sear it like this for probably 2 to 3 minutes. Then I'm going to turn the steak at a 90-degree angle. So that will give me the X on the back of the steak. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do the same again. And then I'm going to put it into the oven. For a steak this size, I want to cook it medium rare. So I'm going to give it about 8 to 10 minutes. And then I'm going to let it rest for about 8 to 10 minutes. So to cook a piece of meat that size, you're probably going to be looking at about half an hour all in to cook it. That's including cooking and resting. Okay, so we come back to that in a few minutes after it's got a good sear. So this steak now has had another 2 minutes. So it's time to give it a turn. I'm going to turn it this way. So, as you can see now, there's some beautiful caramelization happening across this steak. If this was a thinner ribeye that was off the bone, I probably wouldn't have left it as long, and you would have seen those bar marks a little bit more. But what we're trying to do is get all that golden caramelization on the meat, because that's just all means flavour. So it's time now. That's had about 3 minutes, and I'm going to give the steak a turn now. So you just lift it up, and you can see now it's got a nice mark on it, and we're going to turn it and leave it on there. I'm going to give it another little press because I want that nice golden caramelization. And I'm also going to quickly talk about the sauce that I'm going to make. So I'm going to make a little pepper and mushroom and whiskey cream sauce to go with it. So this is a wonderful whiskey that I got as a gift from the Armada Hotel over on the west coast of Ireland. I've got some cream. I have 150 mils of cream. I have about 150 grams of Swiss brown mushrooms, and I have 2 shallots that I've diced up, a little bit of butter to finish the sauce, some salt, and a really, really good twist of black pepper. I've also got a plate here, as you can see, with a resting rack. So after I take it from the oven, I'm going to leave the steak up here. At that point, I'll season it up a little bit more with some lots of cracked pepper. And then any juices that render from the steak onto the plate, I'm going to add them into the sauce, which will add more flavour to the sauce. So this steak now has had its final sear on the other side, and I've turned it around, as you can see. So now it's going to go into a preheated oven where I already have a tray. Sorry, I'm just going to have a sauce. A preheated oven where I have a tray, as you can see, already in there, so it's nice and hot. And I'm going to put that onto the tray with a 200-degree oven, and I'm going to stick a timer on that for 10 minutes, and then I'll have a check to see where it's at. So this steak has just come out from the oven, and as you can see, there's still quite a bit of give in that steak, and the juices are starting to run out a small bit now. This is medium rare. Okay, it's had about 10 minutes. If you wanted to have that a little bit more than medium rare, you'd obviously leave it in the oven for a little bit longer. At this point, before I let it, I'm going to give it a good season with some pepper. I'll turn that around. And then I'm going to leave it for a rest. So now I'm going to cook a couple of sirloin steaks. I have my pan on, my grill pan on as before. It's nice and hot. I've just cooked, or I've seared the Cote Boeuf in there, so you can probably see there's still a couple of juices and bits of beef stuck onto the pan. So a little bit of olive oil, nice season of salt, both sides. I'm going to give it a little bit more oil. And the same as before, I'm going to go and I'm going to try and get the fat nice and crispy. So I'm going to put the 2 steaks together first. And give it another little rub. And then I'm going to press them on together. I'm going to get that fat to get a nice sear. So they've had a minute now of searing on the fat. As you can see, the fat's gone nice and crispy. And we're going to turn them around, give them a little press, just so they're touching the grill all the way along, and leave that on a nice high heat. And as you can see there, lots of smoke. Excuse me. Lots of smoke because I want as much heat as possible here. In a restaurant scenario, we would have, this would be on a char grill or an open flame grill. But I just wanted to show people at home how they can get a nicely cooked restaurant quality steak at home. So turning these steaks over now. Again, there's a little bit too much excess oil in the pan, so I'm just using the tongs to hold the steaks to the pan so I don't scald myself. I'm going to drain a little bit of that oil off into a little ramekin that I have there, and I'm going to turn this steak over. And again, as you can see, I only didn't move that steak at all after I put it into the pan. So again, the most amount of heat, it's up full blast there, and we're going to give that a really good sear. And then I'll turn the steak over again, cook it on that side. I'm going to cook these steaks from start to finish in the pan. A little bit different to the Cote Boeuf. I'll put that one into the oven. And again, I'm going for a medium rare steak here. That's how we like to eat our steaks here my family. So the potatoes I went through earlier on, they're also in the oven. So they were some potatoes with some olive oil that we seared off in a pan. We added in a couple of knobs of butter, a couple of sprigs of rosemary, cooked that again, then seasoned them up with plenty of salt and pepper. Put them into the oven. And we're going to have them with the steaks tonight, along with the mushroom sauce. So I'm going to turn these steaks again to give them a little bit more of a sear on the other side. I'm going to cook them for another 2 minutes on that side, and then turn them over again for about another minute. And then that's all the cooking they're going to have. They're going to be taken off the heat then and be allowed to rest for about 8 to 10 minutes. And while they're resting, I'm going to make the mushroom and whiskey cream sauce that I was talking about. So I've just taken the sirloins out of the pan now, and I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil to the pan, and I'm going to saute my mushrooms. With a couple of knobs of butter, and all of those cooking juices that are in the pan will add to the flavour of the sauce now. So I have it on a medium heat. I'm going to saute these mushrooms down for about a minute. The pan could probably be a little bit hotter. And I'm going to make this mushroom sauce. So we give that another minute. Okay, so I'm just making my mushroom sauce now. So I've added in my Swiss brown and my button mushrooms into the pan where I cooked the steaks. And now I'm adding in the diced shallot. I've 2 diced shallots gone in. I started off with a couple of knobs of butter and a little splash of olive oil to make the sauce. I'm going to cook this down now for maybe a minute, just to soften up those shallots. And now you can really start to get the smell of that classic mushroom and onion that's generally served with steaks. I'm going to give them a good season. This is a peppered sauce, so it's going to look like I'm adding way too much pepper here, but I actually, when the cream goes in and the seasoning, the juices from the steaks, it'll all balance itself out. So we've sauteed off our mushrooms and onions, and now I'm going to add in a good splash of this beautiful Irish whiskey. And then I'm just going to flambe that. The alcohol will start to burn off. So if you're doing that, it's very careful. I move the pan back and I let the flame catch the alcohol. Okay, so it's important that if you haven't done that before, if you're very nervous about it, what I would say to you is take it away from the heat, add in your little bit of whiskey, and then use a lighter and light the sauce, and it'll go up again in flames, but don't be startled by it. It'll just go up and then it'll stop again. Okay, so as you can see, the alcohol is burnt off, so now it's time to add the cream. So I have 150 ml of cream. I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning at this point, and then our amazing steaks have been resting, and as you can see, all that delicious juice is draining off the steaks. People think that that's blood. It's not. It's beef juice. These steaks are cooked already. They've been hung for a minimum of 28 days. So it's not blood, it's just juice. And now we're going to just reduce this sauce down. What that means is we're going to cook it so the sauce will naturally thicken up. I have 1 little knob of butter there. I'm going to throw that in. Waste not, won't I? And then we're just going to cook that down, and we're going to serve that with our delicious steaks tonight. So that's a whiskey, shallot and mushroom sauce, peppered. I'll taste it and adjust the seasoning in a minute. What I mean by that is, it'd be very tempting now to add loads of pepper and salt, and then it's going to reduce down. It'll be too salty or too peppery. So when I'm happy with the consistency, I will then taste it with a spoon, and I'll decide whether it needs more salt and more pepper. Okay, so now the beef has had a good 10 minutes to rest, and I'm going to just carve it up, just so it's a little bit easier for us to eat. So as you can see, that steak is nice and medium rare. There's a bone just there, so we'll just carve around the edge of the bone. So that's our tomahawk or T-bone steak. We're also going to have some delicious sirloin. We're having a real meat feast tonight. So I'm going to give that a little carve up as well. That's also nice and medium rare, as you can see. The other one, I'm just going to leave it there. And then we're serving that all tonight with the peppered sauce. So remember I said earlier on, we're just going to check the seasoning. I'm not making it too peppery because the kids are going to have this as well. And then we're going to just pour that in beside our steak. So we've got grilled Cote de Boeuf, some sirloin steak, and a whiskey mushroom peppered sauce.